Despite his laid-back demeanor behind the Tonight Show desk, Johnny Carson eventually snapped at 7 guests. During his prime, Carson's nightly broadcasts were more popular than Monday Night Football in the NFL. A demographic that anticipated natural charisma, humorous banter, and interviews that felt like they were taking place in someone's living room. Even though he was successful most nights, he was permanently booted from the studio due to some famous people's transgressions. Their disruptive behavior, false accusations, and physical threats resulted in lifetime suspensions. Carson, who could smile his way out of any problem, decided they could never come back. The 7 individuals who were banished and the events that led up to their expulsion are detailed here. Physically aggressive Wayne Newton, who is now banned. The stronger stage lights in Las Vegas are a prank that Carson made once. It takes photosynthesis for Wayne Newton to have hair. The crowd went absolutely wild, but Newton remained silent. After spending millions on the Aladdin Hotel, any harm to his meticulously built reputation was enough to make him react in a way that would put an end to his tenure as host of The Tonight Show. Newton showed up uninvited at Burbank on the day of taping in 1980. Footage from security cameras showed him walking briskly down hallways with his fists clenched and his silk shirt unbuttoned. While Carson was reviewing cue cards, he burst into his office. "Stop making fun of me, Mr. Carson, or I'll give you a good kick in the behind." Carson promptly phoned the security team. He gave the order that Wayne Newton could not be in the building. Immediate and absolute blacklisting has a lasting impact. "No one, absolutely no one, threatens me in my own studio," Carson whispered to close acquaintances, but she never made the threat public. All future booking considerations no longer included Newton's name. Newton's likeness and detailed instructions were included in memorandums sent to NBC security. Not out of fear, but out of policy, every mention to Newton was removed from that evening's script. Anyone who resorted to physical force was deemed to have lost their network television credentials, according to Carson. Fraud led to Uri Geller's ban. Carson hated those who claimed to have real supernatural powers after his experiences with magic tricks as a kid. In 1973, when spoon-bending medium Uri Geller was slated to make a visit, Carson reached out to famous skeptic James Randi to set up a complex experiment. A marble compass, restaurant-grade silverware, undamaged objects, and sealed film containers were all supplied by Randi. All props were safely held by prop master Bobby Quinn until the show began. With an air of amused expectation, Carson started. "Before the sun goes down, we'll be bending some metal in mines." Exuding an air of self-assurance, Geller arrived immaculately groomed. Carson asked him to find drawings hidden in sealed envelopes. With his eyes closed, Geller evidently struggled as he pressed papers on his forehead. "I am exhausted." He uttered a feeble word. Interest among the audience waned. Carson held out the spoon after a long period of waiting. Under no circumstances did anything occur. Now he's acting quite suspiciously. "I'm having a hard time with you. I don't mean to be, right? I just can't stop seeking." "Sure, I'll just take a short break, okay?" "I understand. I heard from your urologist that you aren't feeling very strong tonight." "Tonight is just the beginning. I am now experiencing a pressing matter and am unable to. I promise I'm not trying to be pushy. No, all you're doing is showing me that you're willing to try things. No one would ever be asked to come back." Carson informed the producers that they had exposed him as a fraud on national television. "I will not give another venue for dishonesty." Half of the thousands of letters sent by viewers praised the exposure, while the other half criticized Carson's method. Geller asserted that NBC was involved in sabotaging his career because his other bookings grew. In a furious tone, Carson replied, "He became rich after we exposed his lies, but we never heard from him again." Studio policy was to support prohibition. New guest criteria were instituted by Carson. The Tonight Show began providing props for paranormal demonstrations, and anyone found to be a hoax would be permanently barred from future appearances. Chevy Chase, banned for arrogance. When Chase first appeared on The Tonight Show in 1976, he poked fun at Carson's golf swing. Carson thought the newbies were hilariously on point. The corrupting power of fame was on full display in his 1978 return as Saturday Night Live's breakout star in Foul Play, which was a big office hit. Began by boasting about the box office receipts. 10,000,000 in just 3 days. Not bad for a weekend, isn't it? He then made the comment, "You've got quite the comfortable little operation here," while pointing to the hosts. Many in the crowd let out a chuckle. Carson's face contorted into a furrow. Without hesitation, Chase asserted his right to use the guest room. Despite Carson's typical push, "Tell us about the new movie," Chase veered off the subject and onto celebrity sightings at LAX. His aim was squarely at Carson's infamous fixation with golf. "If I were to host you, I could likely outdrive you as well." The studio was filled with a mix of amused and awkward whispers. Wore a courteous smile as the backstage workers watched as the mood grew frigid. No respite was offered by the commercial break. In his continuous boasting about future projects, Chase even offered to provide NBC his contact details for when they were looking for new talent at 10:30. His banishment was assured by his reply. With a steady tapping of his pencil, Carson listened in silence, wrapping Chase's name up in the blacklist. Subsequently, he got furious and confronted executive producer Peter LaSalle. "Some students think he deserves his position after I've spent 15 years creating this school." Here he finishes. Prohibition went into force right away. The lesson was rapidly absorbed by Hollywood. When you implied that you could take Carson's position, he banished you from his domain indefinitely. Instantly, Chase felt the chill of the treatment. Calls to talent agents were no longer returned. Reporters wanted to know what Carson had said when Chase debuted his late-night Fox show in 1992. Admitted to not getting any kind of message. Carson's group verified. There was no public support, no letters, no phone calls, and just significant quiet. Those who had been on The Tonight Show before would give each other knowing looks when the Chevy Chase show bombed after 5 wild weeks. The 14-year prohibition would remain in effect even after Carson retired. Never sit on the throne if you make fun of it. Bob Hope's scripted rigidity led to his disqualification. Hope would have been great on TV. He was considered sponsor gold by NBC officials. Still, this celeb showed up in Burbank with the index cards that would eventually end his stints on The Tonight Show. Preparation, jokes, questioning techniques, commercial endorsements, and even favored camera angles for reaction shots were all part of Hope's team's hefty packets. This was like getting sheet music for a jazz session for Carson, whose genius came from spontaneous answers. Hope paid Johnny hardly no attention during filming. As he waited for Carson to put up the pre-arranged punchlines, he fixed his gaze on cue cards placed near the camera lenses. Hope hesitated, checked his cards, and then proceeded to give the prepared material despite the altered direction after Carson tried spontaneous follow-ups once. After that, everyone laughed politely, but the producers couldn't help but notice Carson's whitened pencil knuckles. The last straw was a 1978 visit that included no less than 3 mentions of Texaco in the span of 7 minutes. After saying, "Texaco gets more screen time than I do," Carson issued a demand to the show's creators. "I refuse to participate in infomercials posing as interviews." Hope's fame had shielded him from criticism in the past, even when his performances were subpar. However, Carson had limits to how much he could do. Carson effectively advocated for Hope's permanent dismissal, according to internal memos. Carson contended that he is not acting on television. He's acting out advertisements while laughing at himself. At first, NBC was against it. Advertisers spent millions on Hope's specials, but Carson threatened to leave the show if she had to go through any more contrived interviews. The network gave up. Did not receive any formal communication. Instead, booking chances progressively faded away and never returned. The staff noticed a noticeable change in the atmosphere in Carson's dressing area once Hope's ban was enforced. Even legendary figures risked exile for using The Tonight Show as a platform for personal advertisements. Precedent had been set, authenticity was needed. Charlton Heston was blacklisted due to his monopoly on television. Heston was booted off Carson's guest roster because he conducted interviews like congressional hearings. Carson might inquire, "Chuck, were you hurt in any of the chariot scenes?" After 5 minutes of leaning back, Heston would bring up the broken rib incident while recalling his youth on a ranch, his theatrical schooling at Yale, and the concept of artistic risk. An uninterested house band stood by. As precious airtime vanished, Carson graciously nodded. Heston offered supplementary commentary in the form of off-air annotations during commercial breaks. He urged Johnny to visit the NRA Museum and referenced Greek tragedies in Plutarch. Carson preferred short question-and-answer sessions. Viewers were worn out and momentum was lost due to Heston's lecturing. After a program in 1987, producers counted 9 belly laughs, which is much lower than the usual 30. The ratings were indicative of the harm. When Heston's philosophical lectures went on for more than 60 seconds, the audience lost interest. Heston's 15-minute freedom dissertation during a movie violence discussion was the last straw for Carson. Carson later complained to producers about how he was doing his own program within mine. I don't find it entertaining either. A ban was swift and final. Clear directives were communicated to Carson's group. Charlton Heston was out of the guest spot game for good. Carson told his booking agent that he is a great actor and probably a good person. However, he uses each inquiry as a springboard to deliver his Gettysburg Address. Inadvertently, Heston learned of his seclusion when his publicist failed to obtain any appearances from him again. Everybody understood. The entertainment value was more important than any accolades, including an Oscar. Guests who understood the pace of television were necessary for Carson. Not professors who used the evening as a stage for their own performances. Don Rickles faces ban for disruptive conduct. Machine gun insults delivered by Don Rickles delighted audiences, but the chaos he created ultimately cost him a permanent seat on The Tonight Show. His act consisted of charging in before anybody could defend, tearing through audience members, guests, and even Carson, before laughing like a child who had destroyed a window. While guest presenting for Carson on her 1976 vacation, Rickles had the fatal crack. While riffing to the audience, he snatched Johnny's priceless walnut cigarette box, which had been given to him by a stagehand who had rescued Carson from a studio fire. The lid had been mistakenly cracked. Anger was transformed into live humor when Carson returned the following night, found the broken memento, and entertained everyone. Angry that you had broken my box, he stormed onto the neighboring CPO Sharkey set with his accompanying cameras. The crowd booed, Rickles felt sick to their stomachs, and NBC showed the clip again and again for years. Carson, though, took stock away from the camera. Rickles pushed gags that had been redlined by censors, ignored timing lights, derailed segments, and destroyed props. Busted box became an abbreviation indicating a more serious problem. When Rickles made fun of an overweight woman in the front row in 1985, it was the last straw that caused a flood of letters of complaint. Laughable, absolutely, and radioactive as well, Carson informed his producers. In a low voice, he handed down a lifetime ban. At social gatherings, the two men maintained their polite demeanor, but they never let anyone into Studio One. It was joked among the stagehands that danger pay was unnecessary. There will be no flyers, no bruised pride. In other words, there came a point when the mayhem became too much for even the late-night host to bear. Good old Fred Rogers. Prohibited do of issues with pace. Before it became a ratings disaster and convinced Carson that certain personalities weren't suitable for late-night television, Fred Rogers seemed destined to touch hearts. It looked like the schedule memo was spot on. Brief discussion, 5 minutes. Little puppet show for the neighborhood, perfect break from the commercials featuring famous people. But the tempo mismatch was immediately apparent as Roger walked in. He halted in the middle of the stage, waved modestly, and talked with his signature Pittsburgh cadence. My deepest gratitude, my dear friends. Being here makes me happy. Due to the floor crew's inability to discern whether he had finished his greeting, the applause persisted. Carson made an effort at breaking the ice. In your honor, Fred, I sported a pair of white Keds, which I uncovered by lifting a polished loafer. As he said, that's really thoughtful, Johnny. Roger gave a soft smile and clasped his hands. We can get a game-ready vibe from a pair of sneakers. Members of the audience, eagerly awaiting Johnny's return, laughed courteously. It didn't happen. Rogers thought he had finished his statement. As Carson recovered, the control room frantically changed camera angles, and an awkward quiet engulfed the scene. There was a 30-second delay in every scheduled funny beat. Jokes were removed by cue card operators due to a lack of synchronization in timing. Rogers responded with measured patience, pausing for 2 seconds between each thought. Apt for young children. Catastrophic for shows airing at 11:45 p.m. As the show fell apart, Associate Director Bobby Quinn kept an eye on his stopwatch. The commercial music finally came on, and Carson let out a long, heavy breath that fogged his desk. Devastating results came from post-broadcast analysis. Nielsen ratings showed a 3-point drop in viewers during Rogers' piece, broken down minute by minute. Fred Rogers personifies sainthood, Carson reasoned that night, but even saints fail at late hours. This prohibition was imposed for the sake of professional preservation, not any personal grudges. The producers were informed that Rogers would not be returning. As Carson informed the team, there are certain people who are too good-hearted for the fast-paced nature of this job. Even though Carson had learned his lesson, hundreds of people had compliments regarding Rogers' look in the mail. Poor television couldn't be saved by good intentions. The Tonight Show never extended another invitation to Rogers, not out of spite but out of mercy for the show and its audience. Carson would not abide 7 boundary violators: Geller's deceit, Chase's arrogance, Hope's scripts, Newton's intimidation, Rogers' pacing, Heston's monologues, and Rickles' devastation. These weren't just disagreements over character traits. These business decisions were made with Carson's sanity and the show's quality in mind. A resounding message was sent across Hollywood by the bands. Violating the rules of The Tonight Show would result in an individual's permanent banishment from the most prominent stage in television. Having the guts to say never again when entertaining turns into devastation exemplifies the unseen skill of hosting.